In order to find out what it felt like to be free, we had to mentally break free first. If you don't mentally break free, you ain't gonna never be physically free. No matter what you do, even if you attempt to walk in righteousness, that thing that should be freeing you is gonna be your bondage. So that's how we end up going from spirituality to religion. Because you wanted to be in bondage to servitude, so now you got stuck in these religions. Religion's got a purpose, but you ain't using it for the right purpose. Using it to have a goddamn reason to blame God and the devil for your insecurities and your weaknesses that you don't want to let go. Preachers sit there and tell you all day long to give up your demons, your vices. Some of them still have them too. You got to remember, just because a man walk the path don't mean he ain't going to fall down sometime. You know, you don't want the perfect leader, because if he look too perfect, you know, if it sounds too good to be true, you need to look again. Ain't nobody that is not walked in the shoes of the worst of the worst, through the hardest of times and the difficulties and struggles. If they haven't been through what we've been through, they can't tell you how to get out of it. If they don't have a determination to get themselves out of it, they can't tell you how to get out of it. And when you talking about Ein Sof, when you're talking about capturing this wisdom and making the final connect, it's going to do something that's going to have an effect, that's going to be a radiant effect. And a lot of people are going to resent not having their insecurities to hold on to like they was free falling off a cliff and caught a branch. They got to have those weaknesses to feel alive because they don't want to develop the strengths. It's like being the greatest singer in the world, but ain't nobody hear you because you're always singing in the basement in the shower. What good is it to have a gift if you can't share it? Why would you turn it into a curse? So we have to always be cognizant. You're right, man, babe. But it's not, sometimes you have to see somebody else break free. You don't know what it look like, you don't got nothing to compare it to. If you don't know what it look like, you don't got nothing to compare it to, you have to find something to compare it to, even if you have to create it yourself. So I didn't see, I seen a lot of leaders, or what we call them leaders. They never told you where they was going, so they didn't have a destination. So they didn't have a destination. Y'all was all walking to nowhere together. You know, they had ideas, but the ideas were not true liberating ideas. You need a fusion of spirit, science, and matter. You needed the fusion of the three within any movement in order to understand what the problem and the solution is. If you can't look at it from a civilian perspective and the military perspective, you have caught. You know, most people only good at one field. They only study one field, one thing. And they become so good at that one thing that it turns them into an idiot. It turns into an educated fool because they have no clue about the next things that matter on a unified field concept. All of this stuff is related because everything that's without is a reflection of everything that's within. As you learn from learning to write your book of life and identify it, you start finding out that those things which were lacking on the inside is what you've been chasing on the outside. And not until you've assimilated that idea will your wisdom be able to rise to another level. So, the totem animals teaches us lessons. Mine being the gorilla, my familiar being the canine. Those are for purposes. The whole gorilla scenario, RH positive blood, reclaiming the blood right. The mitochondrial influence over the primates is matriarchal. You know, reestablishing the mother at her rightful position and ready to go to war with anybody who want to interfere with that. I'm going to make this as clear as possible. And from the perspective and the lenses of wisdom, I'm going to tell you exactly what I see the problem is. The matriarchal system was established because of a matriarchal planet Earth is feminine. Prime creator, what we call in ancient Kemet Taweret, is feminine. As she becomes incarnate, you see her symbol as the hippopotamus with the human mammary glands. This is the same as when you see your slave antebellum mammy statue. It's the same symbolism, the same meaning. And those were symbols to represent the mother of creation in her true position, because when you look at the zodiac, you got the 12 signs of the zodiac in a 360-degree circle. And in the center of that 363 circle is the seat of the Great Mother. They don't tell us that because they blinded us by moving her sun in the field of view. So you can never see her for what she really is. And this was your patriarchal eclipse. They call it the Kali Yuga. So while we were so focused on the sun, we never knew that he drew all of his light, his solar light, his Ra, came from the love of his mother through her mitochondria, radiating the love energy throughout creation. Without it, there is nothing. So when you start to assimilate the wisdom, the first thing you realize that God ain't no man, and it's not possible that he could have ever been one, and that a man is a side effect of a woman, a mutation of a woman. When you get that first thing understood, and you get to see Sophia for what she really is, and she's not going to surrender, she's not going to bow down, she's not going to quit. She's going to make you earn her respect, because you're going to have to make her earn yours. This going to be a two-way dance between y'all, always struggling, Kundalini rising. At some point, she finally stops and she look at you and say, it's time. The fight is over. And we have to realize one thing, that if anybody think that they're going to be able to be entitled, that's going to be the only crime. You can't think like that. That's the destruction of us. You know, that's the destruction of us. They cut the children off. They cut the children off from the elders systematically. Now, I talked about education on one of my other videos, and step down education. Now, this goes directly to the severing of the wisdom from the elder to the youth. Everything was done in a tier system under the matriarchal system. The elderly women sat back and they watched over everything. Big Mama Madia, they watched over Aunt May and Aunt Susie while they took care of the young mothers and made sure that they had everything right. Step down education, right? Now, watch this. Early education, before it was called a school, was step down education. And they had to get out of that and isolate all of the children so they could submit to authority. In step down education, you passing the wisdom from the elders to the vigor of the youth so that they can control their passions and desires as they grow up. When you turn that off, you have breaks. You have breaks in wisdom where an intelligent child make a foolish decision because there's no saturation of the wisdom through the step-down method that they were receiving. This is why we wrote Aesop's Fables. There's stories in there. It sounds like you're reading for an adult, but look at the level the children have fell from Aesop's Fable to Sam and Meg. Aesop's Fable was bedtime stories for 2-year-olds when they were written. Think about that. Read a 2-year-old book now and you're going to see a bunch of pictures that don't have but like 3 words. Aesop's Fable was bedtime stories for children. There's a catch to Aesop's Fable. Aesop's Fables implant jewels and gems that will be cultivated over a lifetime as the child learned to read signs and symbols as he developed. But we don't read that no more. We read children's stories like the dog ran behind the cat. Slow their brain down, you can interfere with their processing. We're talking about the development of wisdom. It would be better to read Proverbs and Ecclesiastics every night at bedtime than to read what they got us reading now. My mom, that's the only 2 books I used to read in the Bible for a very long time. Because the rest of that stuff was not food for thought yet. I wasn't wise enough to see the wisdom in that. And Daniel being the judgment. You know, Uriel, the fire of God, all those kinds of things didn't make sense to me at that time, so I couldn't assimilate that, but I could assimilate a good name. It's more valuable than diamonds and gold in the Proverbs. It made sense, you know. Who want to go through life with a name like Shithead? You know? But how would you feel if your name was King or Queen? Just the difference in the name changes the way the person feel. We give people namesakes, name them after somebody, we don't tell them why we did it. There used to be an integral part of namesakes, naming your child after your brother because your brother was a stand-up mofo. We lost track of that. You know, these are just some of the things I see. Looking at it eye to eye with Sophia. 14. What about the 14, Elaine? The whole breakdown, like when you listening to the Bible on tape versus reading it, you get a different set of lessons. And I couldn't understand that. Why does it sound different than when I'm reading it? You know. Then when you look at different legends from around the world, and then these stories, and you start moving up to the meet Sophia eye to eye, these stories start lining up with each other out of nowhere. That's called a convergence. All things moving into a central point. And the convergence is a downward spiral or an upward spiral, but it's a spiraling effect. In my case, spiraling toward the center of the self, wondering why you can't release certain things externally that you have internally as a representation, and then you start to understand why. Yep, Daniel 14:27. Yep. But the name Daniel means judgment of El, or the judgment of God, just the name. Daniel being the great judge, we not really understanding what's going on there. That's taken from a Sumerian court order, the book of Daniel. And what had happened in that era, there's one visit of what they call Anu, the king of the gods in the Sumerian doctrine, coming to earth. He was Daniel, because he was the king of the gods. Now remember, it was 3 of them that was captured by Nebuchadnezzar. It was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 was Enlil, Enki, and Anu. And it was only one. They called him Nebuchadnezzar. Nebo mean the light. Think about that. They called him Nebuchadnezzar, and then they cursed him to be as a beast of the field for a period of time. Right? Now, what we're not realizing that's telling us he's going to be going through something called Dark Night of the Soul. That's your book of Job. Now go to the beginning of Job, you see that the devil never tried to do anything to Job. God threw Job to the devil. Hey, you check out my son Job, you better go get him. God did that, not the devil. See, everybody be mad at the devil, but that was Anu issuing the decree for Enlil to have the right in order to blind Nebuchadnezzar. These stories are all overlapping Sumerian doctrine. This is Sumerian text that was filtered through the Babylonians and fed to the world as the Bible in the Christian church through Rome. So the stories are intertwined. They're wove like fabric. You got to take it apart and realign it in order to know what's taking place. Now, in order to understand why Anu even had to come down here for leave Nibiru, you would have had to know that the story was like this. There was a war in heaven. That was Nibiru. What happened up there? Well, the queen of heaven and earth gave birth to a son and pissed Enlil off, and he became jealous. This is your war in heaven. They talk about it in the Gita. Look at how Arjuna's talking about asking Krishna about the family members on both sides of the conflict. It's all the same story spread out all over the world so that we can stay in this shit forever. I'm not buying it. So the blood, according to Genesis, the conflict or the enmity was between the woman seed and the serpent seed. Now, if you look at the zodiac, between Virgo and Scorpio, there is the zodiacal sign of Libra, which is the scales of justice. At one time, Scorpio and Virgo was the exact same sign. The indiscretion there tells us that the Libra or the injustice was placed between them. So the justice had to be established between the Virgo or the young maiden or Venus and Scorpio or Mars, the god of war. So something happened between the god of war, Mars, and Venus that made the gods give a judgment, and it had to be resolved through the laws of Ma'at, because that's where you get your scales of justice to begin with. Right? So in resolving this injustice, what was the injustice? It was the separation of the wisdom from the divine love when they gave the eclipse. The eclipse, or the trying to block out the mother by exalting the male or the son. The eclipse. And so when you're looking at what they're telling you in the stories are all interlocking together, right? And that's why I didn't tell you Revelations that whenever you all of the book, everybody was waiting on somebody to read the book. It was only one person that could read the book, because it take a long time for DNA to spread out to its maximum point, in which it can't spread anymore, before it started to come back into a singularity. It starts out divergent, then it becomes convergent. And the convergence creates your insurgence. They tell it to you in the movies. The DNA got to go out to critical mass, and then it has to implode. Explode, implode. It's the DNA chain. In order for that same signature of DNA, it'll be a different body, but the DNA numbering system has a variable that is limited before it reproduce the exact same sequence that it did in order to facilitate the same refractions of light at your DNA level. In order for all of those rays of light to line up the way they did in a prior era, in order for you to build everything back to where it was, your DNA have to go through a whole lot of changes over a whole lot of time, and then all of a sudden it'll be the exact same DNA sequence. So now, when you do a DNA test for a child, they look for certain markers, never telling you that those markers have a limit to where you can read them. So they keep us confused. See, now they want to keep us idiots forever. The only way to keep us idiots forever is to do one thing. The people to desire to be an idiot and be under oppression forever more than they desire to be free. You have to want to be oppressed more than the oppressor wants to oppress you in order to remain afflicted at this point. And so they keep telling us all these different things. I got, people send me messages and tell me certain stuff. But my thing is this: I'm doing my part. I can't do your part. I can't work with nobody that don't want to work with me, because that's irrational and foolish. And I just hope these people don't keep this oppressive, artificial light matrix in position. They trying to trap us once again through CERN, so y'all know what's going on over there. It's not going to work this time, though, because the contingency is already at play. But they trying. Y'all just need to be aware. And they already didn't confess to it. So when we try to get the key to here, we normally get stuck here. That's why I say, seeing they will not see, hearing they will not hear, for their hearts have waxed cold. Well, what does the word wax mean? Think about that. It didn't just turn cold, or it didn't freeze, it was waxed cold. Think about that. Then start talking to some of your key young masters and asking what are they seeing in the heart chakras of these people they've been healing. Then you start making sense. Their hearts were waxed cold. It didn't turn cold. It wasn't made cold. It's black magic or sorcery, wickedry, whatever you want to call it. It's still science. It's just a type of science that's not for the benefit of the most people. And as long as people ignore the facts, they can't never break it. You know. So you got to stop and turn around and look you in your face and say, I ain't running no more. And you got to stop running too. You got to come one with the wisdom. The Ein Sof. Put on the crown. But I just had a few things on my mind about the wisdom and the philosophers. The Socrates, the Platos, the Aristotles, the Gurdjieffs, you know, ancient mystic masters. All these people did all that suffering. It just don't make sense to me. And people honor them for their suffering. They went all that suffering for you to get from under the suffering, but now that it's time to get from under the suffering, you won't do it? That don't make no sense. You reverence everybody that struggled to get you from under struggling, but you don't want to take a couple of little hits to get from under the oppression. And blame everybody else so you don't have to deal with what you are on the inside. Everything you chasing on the outside of you is what you chasing on the inside of you. That's your clue. And it's not really a clue because it's direct. Because I don't like hiding, I don't like ducking. If I got something to tell you, the deceiver used deception. I don't need it. I use it, but I don't need it. Because I'll walk right up to him and sever his head. It don't matter to me one way or other. So, we got to realize if we ever want to get free, we have to control our energy. That's the simplest way to look at it. Control your energy. Optimize your energy. Become energy efficient within the self. Don't just give yourself and your energy away willy-nilly. And don't keep accepting this oppressive stuff or you're going to be stuck in it. Because I'm not finna be stuck in it. I'm done with it. So, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to go play with my dogs a little bit. Probably walk down to the lake. But, it's about to look up. A lot of changes about to come. Just changes here. Chase the wisdom, feel the love, honor the response. Keep your eyes on the prize. One love.